Your Worship, I move that we come out of in camera at 7:03 p.m.
Thank you. All in favor? At home?
Aye.
Councillor Wiley?
Sorry, I was stumbling. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. So we're back in the public portion of the meeting, and we're back at about 7:02 p.m. We move now to item 5, confirmation of minutes. 5.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for May 8th, 2024. Councillor Peterson.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm not ready for a motion. Confirmation. I would move that Council adopt the May 8th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented in Attachment 1.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion is carried. We move now to 6 business, 6.1 taxi bylaw number 16-14. And Mark, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Worship and Council. I have a quick PowerPoint presentation just to quickly walk through as well, but you can see some of the, just to discuss some of the proposed changes, but while that's loading here, I'll just give you some of the quick updates. So this taxi bylaw has been in our books since 2016. Obviously, it's dated and sees some changes that are need to be, we hope to be to make. We've had some previous conversation with representatives from the 2 Strathmore taxi companies here, and majority of those changes they are in favor of, and they understand that. So just give me a second here for the PowerPoint presentation. Great, thank you very much. So as I mentioned here, I'm here to speak about the existing taxi bylaw number 16.4. Next slide, please. So here's a quick summary of the potential changes. We've added some new definitions for a caregiver and updated our peace officer definition. We've made a revision to the section in the broker license, just a grammatical change, and I can walk you through that next. Revisions to the chauffeur license sections, giving more clarity and requiring certification approval for first aid and CPR. And then revisions to the mechanical inspection section, just to ensure that there's more regular inspections of the vehicles. And lastly...
we can't see the PowerPoint at home.
Oh, apologize, Councillor Wiley.
No worries.
Councillor Wiley, do you have it in your agenda package?
No, I appreciate being able to follow along with him. Thank you.
Just checking if you're able to see it now.
Sure am. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wiley.
Sorry, Councillor Wiley, I thought it was in our agenda, but it's not.
We have the summary piece that's in your agenda, and then, so quickly, new definitions, revisions to the broker license, revisions to the chauffeur license section, specifically certification approval for first aid and CPR, revisions to the mechanical inspection sections, and then lastly, an update to the Schedule A, which is the penalties. So as you can see here, and as I mentioned, we've added new definitions, one for a caregiver, and this is something that we've just recently experienced here, where we've had a company that's looking here to provide a service to residents of Strathmore that don't fit the need or don't fit the same bill as a taxi company. So we've added that provision in there and given them an exemption to this bylaw. The next one obviously is a peace officer, and that's just more updating it to be consistent with our existing bylaws and things like that. Section 3.7, which is the broker's license. As you can see on the PowerPoint as well as in the package, we are changing some verbiage in here to ensure that certifications are issued by a reputable company specifically. Right now, the existing bylaw states that every broker shall have a standard first aid and CPR. One thing we've noted here during our time is that instead of having an in-person CPR training, some of the companies are conducting this or getting this certification via online learning. Next section, we're going to go to the chauffeur licenses. So again, we're talking about just trying to make it easier for, in the case of a lost or stolen license, that the license doesn't need to be reapplied. So again, trying to help the companies here. Moving down to the mechanical inspections, and this is a lot of just verbiage just to ensure that it must be done annually as opposed to will be done annually. The last section here, next slide please, is very similar. It ensures about compliance. And then, like I said, the last section relates to the Schedule A, which is the penalties. We've added specified and minimum penalties. That's the extent of my my report. If there's any questions from council, I'll be glad to answer them.
Deputy Mayor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first question I have is specifically about the definition we've added for caregiver. When I read through the proposed bylaw and did a find all on my, we don't actually use that definition in the bylaw. So I'm wondering if the appropriate version was included or.
Through the chair, I'll have to review that, Councillor Langmaid. Yes, it should be as part of the exemptions. And now maybe it's an old copy that's been not updated, but I'll note that for next time.
Thank you. And then the second question I have is just around that need for first aid and CPR in our taxis locally. I understand that's a thing that's fairly specific to Strathmore, and I was wondering if you have any history on why that came to be.
Through the chair, I don't have a lot of the history. Unfortunately, this bylaw was before my time. There are members of council that were here specifically then as to why that is there. Your understanding is the same as ours. The research we've conducted in our conversations with the taxi companies, this is something unique to Strathmore. Not a lot of other communities have it. Recognizing that this is council's bylaw, so if you wish to remove that or to amend it, then obviously we would be in favor either way.
Would there be any risk to the town if we were to amend or remove that? Any additional risk, do we foresee any risk to the town or to the public?
We'd have, through the chair, I'd have to speak with our legal counsel about this. I would suggest probably not. Obviously, this is something that if we're right now, if it's mandated to us, there's probably more of a risk to us than if we remove it. Ultimately, that's, I think one of the strengths of Strathmore is that, we're a small community, and luckily that we have a hospital, so in the event of a major first aid incident, that they could quickly kind of get to a hospital. But ultimately, like I said, that's council's prerogative based on the existing bylaw.
Thank you. Yeah, just to council. Personally, I'm not sure that I see. I can understand if we were somewhere where maybe we were more rural and if there was an emergency, it would take a lot longer to actually drive to the hospital than it would be to give care. But in terms of Strathmore, if I can only speak personally, but if I'm in a taxi and have a medical emergency, I hope that the person driving me goes, "Oh no, hospital," and goes directly to the hospital for me. Please don't pull over to the side of the road and do first aid first. Please just take me straight to the hospital. But that's just my personal thought. So I would be interested in perhaps rethinking that clause of the bylaw if the remainder of council is interested as well. And that's my final comments and questions. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind bringing forward an amendment then possibly that we can consider when this comes back to us? I agree. I see a lot of what you're saying has a lot of merit.
Absolutely, either through an amendment or if it just came back to us without it, I'd be happy to do either, but.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think we need the amendment. Couldn't we just not
Just drop
include
it. Yeah.
Through the chair, yes, I've made note of that, and we'll.
Okay,
that
perfect.
When we come
Thank
back,
you.
we'll revise it to remove that section entirely.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mark? Oh, Councillor Wiley.
The one I saw, I can't quite find it right now. Maybe somebody could help me find it. It was the one about the dispatch needs to be running. Oh, here it is, 3.8. The dispatch needs to be running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, ensuring prompt service. I don't see the purpose of that. I think if it allows for a company to be more competitive in its rates and they're only offering services at a less amount of time, I would be in favor of removing 3.8.
Mark, do you have any knowledge or any background as far as what other towns do as far as having the availability of 24-hour dispatch?
Through the chair, your worship, no, unfortunately, I don't. This wasn't a section that we had identified as needing updating. But again, we can do some further research and
Yeah,
come back
if
to
you wouldn't
council.
mind for Councillor Wiley to come back with something about that.
It just seems to me that now with 3 companies in town competing for business, I mean, inevitably one of them is going to offer 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for dispatch. But if it brings the cost down for the poor and they're able to offer a cheaper ride fare, you know, by having less dispatch, 24 hours a day is a lot of staffing. I would be in favor of whatever it takes to reduce the cost.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley.
Well, how could we go forward with that? Do we want that to appear when this comes in front of us, or can we just remove it? Give direct administration to remove it? I'd prefer to direct administration to remove it.
Councillor Peterson?
Your worship, would it be reasonable to ask the people who are here in the gallery today if that is a consideration? I know that I did look at only 3 other bylaws, and I didn't see either the measure for first aid, CPR, or for 24-hour dispatch. I think overall it's a really I don't want to say stringent bylaw, but it's an in-depth bylaw. So I'd like to hear from the providers if that's okay, if that's reasonable, your worship.
Sure. Just in terms of the dispatch?
Yeah, just in terms of dispatch.
Thank you.
So I'm Robert, owner of Wheatland Taxi. Regarding the dispatch, 24-hour dispatch, you are correct. For the level of business in town, there's absolutely no need for 3 cab companies to be running 24-hour service. And I'm just going to give you an example. This past Sunday, my driver worked 12 hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., did $71 in fares. It cost me $170 to have that cab on the road. Now, granted, I will say there are times we get hospital runs. People need to go to the hospital, but there's definitely not a need to have 3 cab companies running 24 hours a day. If it's left up to the individual owners, if they want to do it or not, I think that'd be acceptable. And but to make 3 cab companies, we will all be sitting in the parking lot here for 10 hours. So it's I agree that's something that's not really required.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I ask another question of Robert?
Yes, go ahead.
Robert, I don't suppose you had time to look at it, but you're probably fairly familiar with the bylaw from previously. Is there anything else in here that's overly cumbersome or getting in the way of you being the most competitive cab company that you want to be, gets in the way of you being able to bring down your prices to compete, to offer the best price for, the people of Strathmore? Is there anything else in here you'd like to see removed?
The bylaws as the previous one that we're currently in, I know myself and AJ, we don't really have a problem. I mean, the first aid thing, it wasn't a big, as it used to be in days gone by, the big kerfuffle that happened there. But I think they've addressed the concerns about the first aid here. As for the inspections, we're all for that. Keeps the vehicle safe. I know, speaking personally, my vehicles, I get a knock and it's in the shop right away because preventative maintenance saves us money down the roads. So the inspections we have no problem with. Really, there's nothing else in the bylaw that if we directly look at the 24-hour dispatch, the first aid issue, and I think there was nothing else really in changes that came in that we really have a problem with. I mean, I'm all for keeping vehicles safe and keeping the passengers safe, and maybe some of the wording with the cleanliness. I understand it says for the outside of the vehicle, except for snow and rain, but that goes for the inside of the vehicle too. When it's the middle of winter time, you got slush all over, and you just can't get it out after every passenger. So I know nobody would ever come, no bylaw officer would ever come down on us for that. It's just common sense kind of thing. But no, we really don't have any problems with the other bylaws. I know this isn't the proper time to bring it up, so I won't. I talked to somebody out in the hall. I'll bring that up at the next meeting. But no, as it stands right now, those points that we've talked about so far are our only concerns, really.
Thank you. Sure, if you wouldn't mind coming forward and just state your name too.
My name is Ajaypal Singh, and I own Strathmore Taxi. Mostly I was here to listen what my concern was last time. So now there's 3 companies. He dropped his rate almost half, $6 to $10. And will there be a 4th and 5th? When this gonna stop? And I have to lay off at least 2 or 3 guys because now there's 3 companies. Let's see, when there's 4th, maybe I will work alone. So think about it, there's jobs gonna go away. It's happening right now. We are thinking. So I was here mostly to listen what happened to the request which I made and him last time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, do you know if any towns of around our size limit the number of taxi companies?
Through your worship, through the chair, no, your worship, I'm not aware of any restrictions. I know there's some restrictions in the city of Calgary, where obviously there are largest centers. In reality, there's not a lot of communities that actually have within our size. I look at Cochrane, Okotoks, and Chestermere are all 3 that do not have a taxi bylaw. City of Airdrie does, and I'm not aware of any limits on that.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Langmaid?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to chime in a little bit on the 24-hour dispatch requirement. I can understand that is something that takes quite a significant amount of staffing, and I can appreciate that. I think my only concern there is I want to make sure that taxis are available at the times of day that people need them, and one of the times of day that people need taxis is around 1 a.m. when they can't drive home. And so that's my only concern with saying, oh, we don't need 24 hours is, okay, well, if people stop taking rides at 10 p.m., how can we ensure that, how can we best serve people that need a safe way home? And making
Right,
sure
but a
that-
local business would be the one that would be the one who most wants to see that at the time when people need taxis, they're going to get taxis. But what happens when you say 25 days a year, 365 days a year, so 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, is you don't allow the marketplace to dictate when they're going to have the dispatch. And what happens is the rates, the cost of having the cab goes up and up and up.
Thank you. I wasn't entirely sure that I was done speaking there, but I appreciate your input. So yes, that's that's my concern is that we have, because we don't have public transit, we don't have other options to get people home if they're unable to drive. So that's just my concern there. I think it's mitigable. Maybe it comes down to Fridays and Saturday. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to raise that one comment. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mark or the taxi company owners? Councillor
do.
Wiley?
Sure. First, I'd like to apologize to Councillor Langmaid. I shouldn't have interrupted. The taxi cab owner also mentioned that there was some fairly high and stringent expectations on the cleanliness of the vehicle. So that'd be section 11.1. When I read it over, I agree. I see the same thing. I agree with him. I don't think our bylaw officers are just looking for excuses, but at the same time, I feel like some of the strength of the language could be reduced. So I would prefer to direct administration to take a look through section 11.1 and see if they can reduce some of those really stringent expectations on the cleanliness of the taxis.
What are you thinking would be some things?
Also, specifically, Robert mentioned, for example, it's winter, somebody gets into the vehicle, they've got snow on their feet, you know, are they going to every time stop and clean the interior of the taxi? So I just want to make sure that the language, of course, keeps the taxis clean, but without it being overly cumbersome, thus raising the cost of running the service, which raises the cost of the fares, which raises the burden on the riders. And any bylaw that raises costs to the riders hurts the poor the most. So whatever we can do to run a moderate service, not an extremely clean service, allows for the taxi companies to be more competitive, thus lowering the rates.
Thank you. I can give a little bit of background on where this came from. We did have a company some years back that had cabs that were very problematic, and this person was also on the committee to draft this bylaw. So it was an interesting time period, but there was a situation where some cabs were in very bad condition as far as papers, dirt, grease, all sorts of things. So that's the background and where it came from, but I understand the idea of maybe having this looked at and tweaked a little bit. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, so just finally, so administration then council agrees that we're going to just direct administration to take a look at removing the first aid, the dispatch expectations, and maybe reducing some of the burdens on the cleanliness of the interior and exterior of the vehicles. Is that correct?
I believe that's where we're at right now, yep.
I would sure appreciate that. I think that would make this bylaw very good. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other questions? Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Gentlemen, thank you for your input too as well tonight. And that wraps up 6.1, the taxi bylaw discussion. We move now to 6.2, fire services bylaw update. Mark, is this you or Chief Sturgeon?
Your Worship, I think Chief Sturgeon just had to run out for a quick second here, but yes.
Putting out a fire, maybe?
I hope not, because
Me too.
with the deputy here,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, metaphorical fire.
Maybe I can preface the bylaw discussion while he's just returning here. Our fire services bylaw is another one of our existing bylaws that is old and seen needs to be some revisions to our current practices and things like that. I believe the old one was again 2018, so it's kind of seen its day as well. And as a result of that, Chief Sturgeon and his team has reviewed it and actually drafted almost an entire new bylaw. So I'll turn it over to you there, Chief.
Sure.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Council and Worship. Thank you for having me. I'm here to present on the fire services bylaw. I'm sorry I didn't hear what Mark said, but I believe he mentioned that this was hasn't been reviewed since 2018, so rewrite was necessary on this. A few things to go over. So kind of what this new bylaw will do. So it's going to establish the authority and responsibilities of the Strathmore Fire Department, define the roles and powers of the chief and the department members, and empowers the fire chief to establish rules and regulations for the operations of the department, obviously with council's approval. These proposed changes would bring the fire services bylaw in line with our current practices as we operate in the fire department. Some notable things, so kind of the key issues and the concepts. So there's several items that have been updated in this bylaw. First, it would focus on fire prevention, emphasizing the fire prevention by addressing open burning, fire permits, fire bans and restrictions based on environmental conditions, fireworks use in the town, alarm systems, and it would emphasize the importance of public awareness and education regarding fire safety through programs and inspections. It would establish fines and penalties, which is currently missing within the existing bylaw for fire protection services, response to false alarms, enforcement of regulations, and the process and collection of fines. It also outlines the responsibilities of the department, including their specific powers at the scene of an incident. Altogether, the new fire services bylaw addresses any inconsistencies in the existing bylaw by adding clarity and enforceability. It addresses emerging fire safety concerns and ensures the bylaw continues to meet the needs of the community. Lastly, the updated bylaw is necessary to ensure that it aligns with any changes in provincial or federal legislation. And in addition to what's presented before you in this new bylaw, I had one addition after speaking with bylaw enforcement and municipal enforcement. So in the section on page 92 of your package, we wanted to add at the very end, basically another penalty or fine. And so this would be to obstruct or block a fire lane or an access route, and the minimum penalty would be $250, and the specified penalty would be $500. And that's, adding that is just kind of what we're seeing around the communities, and it's more about the large garbage bins being stored in fire lanes and things like that. So we'd actually have an enforceable measure to get those out of there. So outside of that, if you have any questions or anything you want me to dive in deeper, I'd be happy to help.
Thank you for that presentation. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Chief Sturgeon, on page 92 again, page 15 out of 20 on the bylaw report, on 18.1, can we really put people in jail?
Sorry, say that again?
Can we put people in jail? It says, in a default of payment imposed to a period of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months?
So this is actually taken
Under
from
the criminal code?
Yeah, under criminal code in the legislation. So that's something that obviously could be changed.
So do we have to reference the criminal code? Like, it's exciting that we could put people in jail, but I don't think we can. But maybe we can just reference that it would fall under the criminal code.
Under the
somehow.
criminal code, sure.
Although, if we could do that, man, it'd be good. Thank you for the presentation.
Deputy Mayor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question about Section 16, fire protection charges. I have a couple of questions. On 16.2, it says the schedule of fees for fire protection charges shall be set as set out in Schedule A of this bylaw and amended from time to time, but in the Schedule A I have attached, it only shows penalties for contraventions. It doesn't have any fire protection charges outlined in that schedule. Is that to come?
Sure. So potentially I could rewrite that sentence. Basically, our fees for fire services are in our fees bylaw, so that's reviewed every year by council. So I could just change the wording on that to reference that. But the intended purpose was actually, yeah, the penalties in this bylaw would reflect in Schedule A, and then I could mention the fees in the fees bylaw.
Okay,
town
so that
fees
should
bylaw.
just be refer to the fees
Yeah,
bylaw. That's
absolutely.
Excellent. And then the second question I just have around fire protection charges is I see here that we do have a fine, sorry, I'm scrolling really quickly, a fine specified for, and I'm going to summarize here, but basically, sorry, I'm looking for it. To create or allow a fire hazard on land owned or occupied in control of. And I understand that this year we did do some hazard control burning, which was new for the town, and some of that did occur, as I understand from the map that was published, on private lands, on lands that those folks owned. So what I'm kind of wondering is, in terms of fire protection charges, if a landowner has created a situation where there is a fire hazard on land that they own and requires remediation through prescribed burning and through a hazard reduction program like that, is there a way that we could try and recover the costs for doing that? Because at that point, it's a service to correct a deficiency, right? You know, they've created a hazard which is against this bylaw, and then we're going in to fix it for them. and we pay for it. So I'm wondering, like, I understand there's also value to that in terms of providing training opportunities for our crews. And I'm just wondering if there's been any thought given to how we're handling that and moving forward on it.
Sure. So this year we took the approach, obviously, to go in because we wanted to introduce it to the town, obviously, with council support. It was great. We had great reviews from it. We never specifically talked about that. We did kind of talk about it internally if down the road we wanted to go that avenue. But maybe administration could speak more to it. I guess in certain scenarios, you could maybe want to do that if something was egregious and they weren't dealing with it. But typically, like through education, if we're able to talk to them, and a lot of the letters went out this year, there were some hesitant landowners, and once we talked them through the process and told them why and the things they were doing, I would say like our response rate was close to 80%. So it was quite high, and they were really accepting and really excited to try it and see. And then since that time, they've seen the benefits of the regrowth and the reduction of those hazards. So I personally would be hesitant, but that's my personal opinion on it. I think through probably our municipal enforcement bylaw, we have probably other avenues to clean up properties that we could probably do that. Maybe Kevin could elaborate more on that.
Well, like the chief said, it was kind of the first year. But when we were looking at it, as he said, we did talk about it. I mean, it certainly could be something we looked at a fee for. The position of administration, and we did talk about it, was really it's a community-wide safety initiative, right? So it's kind of a service to the entire community, and I guess the alternative is like the firefighters are trained, they know what they're doing, as opposed to somebody trying to do it themselves or hiring a contractor. And so we thought it was community safety in the longer term, but we also thought it was community safety during the exercise itself, right, to make sure nothing got out of hand. So
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm still not. If I don't mow my yard and it creates a condition that violates a bylaw under community standards, the town does not come mow it for me for free. If I own a piece of property that's creating a fire hazard to the point where a hazard reduction burn is required, I'm not, that's just where I'm sitting on it. I'm not sure where our council is, but if there's a condition that requires mitigation, it seems like it seems like, the way that this is written, it seems like there would be no actual motivation for me as a property owner to handle possible combustibles on my land, because the fire department will come in and burn it for me.
yeah, I mean, like I said, it could be either way. We see it. We saw it at the time as community safety. It's a good training opportunity, like we've talked about. There's certain times of the year you want to burn as well, and so we expect them to maintain it in the non-burn periods. But with the dry spring we had, a lot of people aren't necessarily mobilizing to cut their grass or whatever too. So we wanted to get ahead of it. We did see some wildfires or grass fires in the area. So I mean, administration overall is indifferent. If that's where council wants to go, we just we saw it as again, community safety and training opportunity and an activity that the fire department could do. So,
thank you. And to be clear, I think it is a good program. I do see the benefits and the value of it to the town, and that it is a community safety initiative. I'm not against. I'm not against them. I'm just wondering in terms of whether we should be maybe pursuing some.
Could I just add to Kevin's comment? Yeah. Maybe just two ways to think about it. So if there's combustibles pile up on a property, so through the Safety Codes Act, we can enforce measures to have that cleaned up. As far as like vegetation wise, probably not, as that language isn't currently in the Safety Codes Act. So I think I think that's what you're talking about, is more on the vegetation side. So I think through our best bet through that would probably be through the Fire Smart program and the education. And the education typically works really well. And we can assign resources kind of through our inspection process or inspection side. But definitely, like, if council wanted to pursue something where, even in that scenario, I don't know that we would actually go onto somebody's property without their permission to burn it off for them. So I have a hard time like drawing that line where we would actually go in and do that. If there's a pileup of combustibles, say it was like propane tanks and plastics and wood and stuff everywhere, like we already have that Safety Codes Act that we can go in and enforce those measures. So I don't know that it would have a huge amount of value, but I could see your point 100%.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for our chief? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation, and this will come back to us when?
Through the chair, obviously we have to look at making some adjustments
Yeah.
and some amendments. Probably, ideally, well, based on our schedule, maybe July, potentially in September.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again, Chief Sturgeon. That brings us to item 7, question and answer period. Any questions or answers from any of councilors tonight? Seeing and hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:38.